It was a quiet afternoon in a small suburban town. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light over tidy front yards and quiet streets. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and birds chirped in the distance. Everything felt calm and slow, like the kind of day made for peace. Marcus drove carefully down Maplewood Lane, a street lined with neat houses and blooming gardens. The windows of his silver car were rolled halfway down, letting in the warm spring air. A soft jazz tune played from his speakers, low enough to hear the world outside, but loud enough to fill the silence. He was in his mid-30s, dressed in a clean polo shirt and pressed slacks. His beard was neatly trimmed, and he wore a simple silver watch. There was something calm about him, his posture, his hands on the wheel, the way he glanced at street signs with quiet focus. He looked like someone who had seen a lot, but didn't carry it around. Marcus was headed to visit his mother, who had just come home from a short hospital stay. He hadn't seen her in months, not since returning from a long trip. Today was supposed to be simple, peaceful, just a son going home. As Marcus turned onto Pinecrest Drive, the calm mood began to shift. In his rear-view mirror, he noticed a police cruiser pull out from a side street and start following him. He didn't think much of it at first. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't breaking any laws. Still, something in his chest tightened. A few seconds later, the flashing red and blue lights came on. Marcus pulled over right away. He put the car in park, turned off the music, and placed both hands clearly on the steering wheel. His fingers were still, his face calm, but his heart had started to race. This wasn't new. It had happened before, too many times. The officer took his time getting out of the car. He looked to be in his mid-40s, with a thick mustache and sharp eyes that scanned Marcus like a threat, before a word was even spoken. The officer didn't greet him, didn't ask how he was doing. He just barked, "Step out of the car, now." Marcus blinked. "Officer, may I ask?" Out of the car, the cop snapped, one hand near his holster. Marcus stayed calm. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong. Can you tell me why I'm being stopped?" "You match the description of someone causing trouble in the area," the officer said quickly. Eyes narrowed. Marcus didn't argue. He knew better. He moved slowly, carefully, opening the door with one hand while keeping the other visible. The moment no longer felt like a traffic stop. It felt like something else, something heavier. From the sidewalk nearby, a woman watering her plants paused and watched. A jogger slowed down and looked over. The street was still quiet, but now the quiet felt tense. Officer Daniels stepped closer, towering over Marcus as he stood beside the car. His voice was louder now, sharp like a warning bell. "I said keep your hands where I can see them," he shouted, though Marcus hadn't moved. "They are, sir," Marcus replied quietly, keeping his tone respectful, his eyes steady. He didn't want to give the officer any reason to feel threatened, even though he wasn't a threat at all. Daniels looked him up and down, his jaw tight. "What are you doing in this neighborhood? You live around here?" "I'm visiting my mother," Marcus said calmly. "She lives just a few blocks down." Daniels scoffed. "Sure she does. Driving around, music playing, acting slick. You think you don't have to follow the law just because you're wearing nice clothes?" Marcus blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me," Daniels snapped. "People like you think you can do whatever you want. That won't fly here. People like you." The words stung, even though they didn't surprise Marcus. He'd heard them before, in different forms, in different places, but they always carried the same weight, the same poison. "I haven't broken any laws," Marcus said, steady but firm. "Step back. Hands behind your back." Daniels barked. "For what?" Marcus asked, voice still calm, but with a touch of disbelief. "I've done nothing wrong." The officer took a step closer, clearly agitated now. "Don't get smart with me, boy." That word again, boy. A word meant to belittle, to strip away dignity. Marcus could feel the old anger rise up inside him, but he pushed it down. He couldn't afford to lose his cool. Not here, not now. More people were starting to notice. A man across the street pulled out his phone and began recording. A teenage girl whispered something to her mother, as they watched from their front porch. Still, Daniels didn't back down. If anything, the presence of an audience only seemed to make him louder, more forceful. He was trying to make an example out of Marcus, but he didn't know who Marcus really was. Not yet. The commotion had turned heads. A few more neighbors stepped outside, peeking from porches and driveways. Some looked concerned, others looked confused, and a few just stood still, watching with heavy silence. A young teenage girl stood at the corner, phone in hand, recording. Her voice could barely be heard over the shouting. He didn't even do anything. Marcus stood tall beside his car, still calm, still quiet, but anyone looking closely could see the sadness in his eyes. This wasn't new to him, being treated like a suspect, just for existing. This was a story he'd lived too many times. Still, he refused to let it break him. Officer Daniels, on the other hand, was growing more tense. He seemed aware now that people were watching, cameras were rolling, but instead of stepping back, he puffed his chest out even more. "You think because people are watching, I'm gonna treat you different," he sneered. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence said everything. It said, "I see you. I've dealt with worse. I will not be shaken." A man across the street spoke up. "Hey, officer, he's not doing anything wrong." Daniels turned and snapped, "Mind your business, sir." But the crowd wasn't shrinking. It was growing, quiet still, but alert. Every eye was on the scene, unfolding on that quiet street. And Marcus, he hadn't even raised his voice. Not once. He didn't need to. He knew something the officer didn't. The truth was still in his pocket. Marcus took a breath and spoke gently. Not for the officer, but for everyone watching. "Sir," he said, his voice steady, "may I reach into my pocket to get my ID?" Officer Daniels paused. He glanced at the crowd, then back at Marcus, clearly unsure. The tension hung heavy in the air. Slowly he finally said, hand still resting near his holster. Marcus nodded once. He moved carefully, reaching into his back pocket, and pulling out a slim black wallet. He opened it with one hand, and handed over a single card. A silence followed. Daniels took the ID, and looked down. Everything about his body language changed. His eyes darted back to Marcus, then to the card, then back again. His jaw tightened, not with anger this time, but with something else. Fear or maybe regret. The badge on the ID was unmistakable. Alongside it was a card marked with the official seal of the United States military. It listed Marcus's full name and rank, Captain Marcus D. Harlan, U.S. Army Intelligence. The crowd didn't know exactly what it meant, but they could feel the shift in the air, the tone, the posture, the balance of power. Everything changed. Daniels blinked, his voice suddenly softer. "You're military?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He just looked at him, eyes calm, unreadable. "Yes," he said after a pause. "I've served this country for 12 years. Daniels looked around. Some of the bystanders had stopped recording, but others still held up their phones. The silence was thicker now, heavier than the shouting ever was. Daniels stammered, trying to speak. "I didn't realize, I didn't know who you were." "You didn't care to," Marcus replied, still soft-spoken. "You just saw what you wanted to see." Daniels swallowed hard. His face had lost its color. The angry, confident officer was gone, replaced by a man who realized he'd made a very public mistake. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He didn't have to. The card in Daniels's hand said more than words ever could. And for the first time since the stop began, the street was completely still. Marcus stood quietly, watching Officer Daniels struggle to find words. The officer's hands trembled slightly as he handed back the ID card. The loud, angry voice that had barked orders minutes ago was gone. All that remained was an awkward silence. "You're free to go," Daniels mumbled, not meeting Marcus's eyes. But Marcus didn't move right away. He slipped the card back into his wallet slowly, then looked up at the officer. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "This is how you treat people when you don't know who they are?" he asked. Daniels opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "You didn't see a man," Marcus continued. "You saw a problem. and you wanted to control it. The crowd was still watching, still silent. Some nodded slowly, others stared at the officer with disbelief. Daniel stepped back, unsure of what to say or do. His confidence had drained completely. The uniform that once gave him power now felt heavy on his shoulders. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply returned to his car, with quiet dignity, his movements slow and respectful, just like they had been from the beginning. As he opened the door, someone in the crowd whispered, "He's military." Another voice added, "He handled that better than anyone else would have." Marcus got in, closed the door, and started the engine. The soft jazz came back on, filling the silence like nothing had ever happened. But something had happened, and no one watching would forget it. Marcus didn't look back as he pulled away from the curb. His eyes stayed on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. Behind him, Officer Daniels stood frozen, surrounded by a quiet crowd, and the weight of his own actions. There were no lawsuits filed that day, no press conferences, no headlines, just silence. But that silence spoke volumes. Marcus hadn't needed to raise his voice. He hadn't needed to flash his badge, or list his achievements. His calm had been louder than anger. His dignity had done more damage than shouting ever could. The people who watched would remember. They'd remember the man who stayed composed while being humiliated. They'd remember how quickly respect appeared only after power was revealed. And they'd remember how the officer changed, not because he saw a human being, but because he saw a title. As Marcus drove away, the sun was still shining. The music played soft and steady, and for the first time that day, his chest felt light, not from pride, but from restraint. He had nothing to prove, but in that silence, justice had already been served. Not in court, not in handcuffs, but in truth. Truth that couldn't be shouted over. The quiet streets of that neighborhood returned to normal soon after. The officer got back in his car. The crowd slowly went home. The moment was over, but for some it would never really be forgotten. Marcus didn't talk about it when he got to his mother's house. He smiled, hugged her gently, and helped her into her chair. They sat and talked like nothing had happened, like everything was fine. Because that's what men like Marcus had learned to do, carry the weight in silence. But the truth was, this wasn't just one bad cop, or one unfair stop. This was a piece of something bigger. Marcus had risked his life overseas. He had served in war zones, led soldiers, stood face to face with danger that most people couldn't imagine. He had worn the uniform with pride. He had protected people who didn't even know his name. And still, he wasn't safe on his own streets. Not because of what he had done, but because of how he looked. People didn't see the years of service when they looked at him through a car window. They didn't see the leadership, the sacrifice, the courage. They saw skin, and they judged from that alone. Some uniforms are worn to serve, others, to feel power. Marcus knew the difference. He had lived the difference. And on that quiet afternoon, without raising his voice or making a scene, he showed the world a hard, honest truth. Respect should never have to be earned through a title. It should begin with seeing the human being first. If this story moved you, or made you think, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? Your voice matters, and your story could help others understand the truth. Stay tuned for more real stories that reveal what's often left unseen.